The alien fleet drifted silently in the vast emptiness of space, its massive ships casting shadows over the distant stars. The fleet was led by the highly advanced Vexari, a race known for their intelligence and technological superiority. But today, something new had appeared on their scanners, a human warship. The Vexari had encountered many species in their time, some more powerful, others weaker, but nothing like the human warship that was now on their radar. The ship's unusual readings had caught their attention, and now curiosity mixed with a strange feeling of unease. What were the humans planning? What was this ship capable of? On the bridge of the alien flagship, the Vexari commander, Thalrix, stood before the massive holographic display, his many eyes scanning the data pouring in. The human warship was unlike anything they had ever seen before. It was a huge, dark vessel, with angular edges and a surface that seemed to absorb the light around it. Its weapon systems were powerful, but that wasn't what worried Thalrix the most. "What is this?" Thalrix murmured, tapping his clawed fingers on the control panel. "This ship, it's too advanced. Its energy signatures don't match any known technology." One of the officers, Vorn, stepped forward. "Sir, I've been tracking their energy patterns. They're irregular. They don't behave like anything we've ever encountered." Thalrix narrowed his eyes. The last time the Vexari encountered a ship this strange, it had ended in disaster. They'd lost an entire fleet to an unknown enemy. Was this human warship part of the same new threat, or was it something else entirely? A soft beep interrupted his thoughts. A signal was coming in from the human warship, a clear challenge. The Vexari had only one way to find out what the humans were really capable of. The fleet was ordered to prepare to scan the ship. "We will scan them. We need to know everything about this ship before we make our move," Thalrix commanded. The scanning beam shot out from the Vexari flagship, a focused pulse of energy aimed directly at the human warship. Thalrix watched as the data began to flood in. His heart rate quickened as the scan revealed more than they had expected. The ship's shields were unlike any technology they had ever studied. They seemed to deflect energy, absorb it, and then redirect it. And that was just the beginning. This isn't possible," Vorn whispered, eyes wide in shock. "Their technology. It's advanced in ways we can't even understand." Thalrix felt a chill crawl up his spine. They had underestimated the humans. He had heard the stories, of course, how humans were resilient, how they never gave up. But this warship was something entirely different. It was as if it had been designed for survival, no matter the odds. The Vexari commander quickly issued a new order, increased the scan intensity. "I want everything about this ship. I don't care what it takes." As the scan deepened, Thalrix's thoughts began to race. Could this be the moment the Vexari encountered something that could truly threaten them? Or was this a test they might fail? The silence of space seemed to grow louder as the truth began to set in. The human warship wasn't just an enigma. It was a challenge, and the Vexari had no idea what kind of threat it represented. What they had seen so far was only the beginning. The Vexari fleet hung motionless in space, their ships floating like giants in the void. Every eye on the bridge of the flagship was glued to the screens, watching the results of the scan in stunned silence. The human warship, once just a speck on their radar, now loomed large with secrets they couldn't understand. Thalrix, the Vexari commander, stood tall, his many eyes flicking from one data stream to the next. He had seen countless ships and battles in his long life, but nothing like this. The human warship's shields were a mystery. They didn't work the way normal shields should. They seemed to bend and twist energy, absorbing it, and then using it to strengthen themselves. No weapon the Vexari had in their arsenal could break through them. "What are we dealing with here?" Thalrix muttered, his voice low and filled with a mixture of awe and fear. He had heard of humans before, but he had never imagined they were capable of such a thing. Vorn, his second in command, turned to him. "Sir, the data is unlike anything we've seen. We are only getting fragments of the full picture. But the ship is not only shielded, it has offensive capabilities we can't even analyze yet. Thalrix's claws tightened on the console in front of him. He had been prepared for many things, but this was unexpected. Humans were supposed to be weak, their technology primitive compared to the Vexari. But this ship, this warship, was different. It was a true challenge. The Vexari had long considered themselves the dominant force in the galaxy, but now they were faced with a problem they had never anticipated. The possibility that humans might have technology far beyond their expectations. "Continue the scan," Thalrix ordered, trying to steady himself. "I want every piece of information you can gather. We need to know what we're up against." As the scan continued, the Vexari officers exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected to find weapons of mass destruction, advanced defenses, but the scan revealed something else. The human ship was alive in a way. Not physically, but the energy signatures coming from it were almost organic. It was as if the ship itself had learned to adapt, to evolve. One officer, a young Vexari named Jorik, spoke up hesitantly. "Sir, it's not just the ship. The human crew, there's something about them. Their biosignatures, they're different." Thalrix turned to him sharply. "Different? In what way?" Jorik hesitated. "It's hard to describe. Their physiology, human biology, doesn't normally function this way. They seem to be constantly adapting, evolving in real time. The longer we scan, the more I can see it." The room fell silent as the gravity of the statement set in. The Vexari had encountered species that could evolve, but nothing like this. The humans didn't just build ships. They seemed to mold them, shape them, making them an extension of themselves. And it wasn't just the warship, it was the humans themselves. Thalrix stood motionless for a moment, trying to process this new information. "This changes everything." He turned to his officers, his voice now filled with urgency. "We've underestimated them. Prepare the fleet to disengage. We will study this further, but we cannot risk a full confrontation until we understand the true power of this human warship." But even as he gave the order to retreat, a part of him knew that this wasn't the end. The Vexari had never faced a threat like this before. They had no idea what the humans were truly capable of, but they were about to find out. In the distance, the human warship sat still, its dark silhouette watching them. The challenge had been issued. The Vexari now had no choice but to meet it. The Vexari fleet moved cautiously through space, the massive ships trailing silently behind their flagship. Despite the command to retreat, Thalrix couldn't shake the unease settling deep in his mind. The scan had revealed more than they had anticipated. The human warship was not just a vessel. It was a living entity, a machine that adapted and changed, an unknown force waiting in the dark of space. On the bridge of the flagship, Thalrix stood staring at the holographic display, his many eyes watching the distant human warship. It was still there, almost motionless, as if waiting for something, waiting for them. His claws twitched, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a blade. The crew was silent, each member lost in their thoughts, trying to process the information that had just been revealed. Vorn, the second in command, finally spoke. "Commander, we've never encountered anything like this before. Not even close. I'm not sure we're ready to face them." Thalrix looked at him. "Are we ever ready for the unknown, Vorn?" His voice was steady, but there was a hint of doubt in his tone. The Vexari had always been the strongest, the smartest, and yet this was something they couldn't predict. As the fleet drifted further away from the human warship, a quiet thought nagged at Thalrix. What if retreating wasn't the right decision? What if the humans saw this as a sign of weakness? The Vexari were supposed to dominate, not run. "We need to understand them," Thalrix muttered to himself. "This warship, it's not just a weapon. It's a statement. Humans are not as weak as we've been led to believe." Vorn approached him cautiously. "Sir, Are you suggesting we should engage them again? After everything we've seen? Falrix hesitated, staring into the depths of space. He had never felt so uncertain. The scan had shown that the human warship could withstand incredible amounts of energy. It could adapt. And the crew, there was something about them that felt different. I'm not sure, Falrix replied. But we can't just leave this unanswered. We need more data. We can't risk underestimating them again. The Vexari commander turned to his communications officer, an older officer with a reputation for being pragmatic. Send a message. Not to engage, but to understand. Let's see if we can open communication with the humans. The officer nodded and began typing a series of commands. Moments later, a transmission was sent from the Vexari flagship. The message was simple. We wish to understand. Do you seek peace, or will we meet in battle? For a long while, the crew waited in tense silence, staring at the empty space in front of them. The communication channels were open, but the human ship remained still. There was no reply. The uncertainty hung heavy in the air. Then, just as the crew began to wonder if their message had been ignored, a signal flashed on the screen. The human warship was responding. On the bridge, the crew leaned forward, eyes fixed on the display. The message that came through was clear and direct. We do not seek peace. We will defend ourselves. Come if you dare. Falrix's heart skipped a beat. The human response was not what he had expected. The humans weren't intimidated. They weren't backing down. This changes everything, Falrix muttered under his breath. The alien commander realized that they were no longer dealing with a simple warship. The humans had just shown their strength, their will to fight. And now, there was no turning back. The Vexari had to make a choice, continue to retreat, or take a risk and challenge the unknown power of humanity. The tension aboard the Vexari flagship was suffocating. The message from the human warship had sent shockwaves through the entire fleet. It was clear now. The humans were not afraid of them. They had been challenged. And that challenge was one the Vexari could not ignore. Falrix paced back and forth on the bridge, his many eyes scanning the data screens, his mind racing. The message from the humans had been simple but loaded with meaning. We will defend ourselves. It wasn't a plea for peace, nor was it a call for war. It was a declaration of survival, a warning that the humans were not to be underestimated. Vorn, standing by his side, looked just as uneasy. Sir, they're not afraid of us. The message was clear. If we engage them, we may not walk away the victors. Falrix stopped pacing and turned to face his second-in-command. I know, Vorn. I know. His voice was quieter now, a rare moment of vulnerability in a commander known for his certainty. But can we afford to show weakness? Can we afford to back down when we don't fully understand what we're dealing with? Vorn remained silent, his eyes glued to the screen showing the human warship. The ship was still there, unmoving, its dark silhouette against the stars a reminder of the challenge they had accepted. After a long pause, Vorn spoke again, his voice filled with concern. But sir, we still don't know how their technology works. What if they have more tricks up their sleeves? What if they're stronger than we think? Falrix clenched his claws. That's exactly why we need to engage them. We can't let fear control us. If we back off now, the humans will see us as weak, and that will be worse than anything they could do to us. The room grew quiet as the crew absorbed their commander's words. It was clear that the decision had been made. The Vexari fleet would not retreat any longer. They would face the humans head-on. But there was still one question left unanswered. How would they fight? The human warship was unlike any they had encountered before. Its energy shields were impenetrable, its weapons were unknown, and its crew was unlike any other. The human warship was more than just a ship. It was a symbol of defiance, a challenge to everything the Vexari believed about themselves. Prepare the fleet, Falrix finally ordered. We will engage the humans, but we will do so carefully. We can't underestimate them. Not again. The Vexari fleet began to position itself, surrounding the human warship, ready for whatever came next. The ships moved like shadows through the stars, their sleek, advanced forms blending with the darkness of space. As the Vexari closed in, Thaurix's thoughts drifted to the human message once more. "We do not seek peace," the humans had said. Thaurix had expected to hear a plea for mercy, but instead they had received a challenge. The humans were ready for whatever the Vexari could throw at them. The alien commander couldn't help but feel a sense of respect for the humans. They weren't the weak, primitive species the Vexari had believed them to be. They were strong, and they were ready to defend what was theirs. For a moment, Thaurix felt the weight of the situation. The battle ahead could change everything. The Vexari could lose more than just the warship. They could lose their pride, their confidence, but there was no turning back now. "Ready the weapons," Thaurix ordered. "It's time to see if we're as powerful as we think we are." The Vexari fleet surrounded the human warship, their ships floating in the dark expanse of space like predators closing in on their prey. The tension was thick, almost suffocating. On the flagship, Thaurix stood tall, his many eyes focused on the human ship ahead. His mind raced with questions and doubts. Was this the right decision? Could they truly defeat this unknown enemy? The human warship sat there, still and silent, as if it was waiting for something. Its dark, angular silhouette against the backdrop of distant stars seemed almost alive, like a beast lurking in the shadows, ready to pounce. "Commander," Vorn's voice broke through the silence. "The fleet is ready, but we still don't know how their technology works. We should proceed carefully." Thaurix nodded, but his mind was already made up. He had already given the order. There was no turning back now. "We can't afford to be cautious forever. If we don't take action now, we might never get another chance." The Vexari fleet's weapons hummed to life, ready for battle. Thaurix knew that the human ship's shields were formidable, perhaps impenetrable, but they had no choice but to try. They had to test the limits of the human technology. They had to find a weakness, and if they didn't, they would lose everything. Thaurix looked around at his crew. He had seen many battles, fought alongside his people for centuries, but never had he felt this uncertain. There was something different about this warship, something he couldn't explain. The humans were not acting like any other species they had encountered before. They were calm, patient, and utterly unafraid. The human warship remained still, like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It was almost as if they were taunting the Vexari, daring them to make a move. The silence between the two fleets was deafening. "Commander," another officer called, his voice trembling slightly, "we're getting a strange signal from the human ship. It's not a communication, but it's something else." Thaurix's gaze snapped to the screen. The signal was a strange pulse, an energy pattern that rippled through space, reaching out from the human warship. It wasn't an attack, but it was powerful, almost like a warning. Before Thaurix could speak, the human warship fired. A beam of brilliant light shot out, slamming into the closest Vexari ship. The attack was so fast and so precise that the Vexari barely had time to react. The ship that was struck exploded into a burst of energy, its shield failing instantly under the force of the blast. The Vexari fleet was thrown into chaos. Their shields flared to life, but the damage was done. The humans had proven one thing: they were not to be taken lightly. "Return fire," Thaurix shouted, his voice filled with anger and disbelief. He had not expected the human warship to strike so quickly, so decisively. But now that it had, there was no turning back. The Vexari ships fired their own weapons, but the human warship's shields absorbed the energy, redirecting it harmlessly back into space. Every attack the Vexari launched seemed to be swallowed by the ship's defenses, like water hitting a stone wall. "This is impossible," Vorn muttered, his voice thick with disbelief. "Their technology. It's beyond anything we can comprehend." Thaurix's eyes narrowed. He had underestimated them, but it was clear now. The humans were not just defending themselves. They were fighting to win, and they were doing it with a skill and precision the Vexari had never seen before. "We need a new strategy," Thaurix said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "We can't fight them like this. We have to find another way." The battle raged on as the Vexari fleet faced the terrifying power of the human warship. The air on the Vexari flagship was thick with tension. Officers scrambled at their stations, trying to track the movements of the enemy ship, but no matter what they tried, the humans seemed to be one step ahead. Every time they launched an attack, the human warship absorbed it, like an impenetrable shield. Thaurix stood motionless at the center of the bridge, his many eyes narrowing as he observed the chaos unfolding around him. His heart raced with frustration. They were losing. The human warship had proven to be far more powerful than they had anticipated. And yet, it was clear the humans weren't trying to destroy them. They were testing them. Every strike, every movement, felt deliberate, as if they were waiting for the Vexari to make a mistake. Vorn, his second in command, turned to him with a look of concern. "Commander, we need to rethink our strategy. We're not even getting close to penetrating their shields. If we keep attacking like this, we'll lose more ships." Thaurix clenched his claws in frustration. He knew Vorn was right. The direct approach wasn't working. The humans had made it clear that they were ready for battle, but they were also cautious, waiting for the Vexari to make a misstep. He needed to outsmart them, not just overpower them. "Prepare to withdraw," Thaurix ordered, his voice cold and calculated. The decision felt like a defeat, but he knew it was the only option. "We'll fall back to regroup. We need to reassess and find a way to break through their defenses." As the fleet began to retreat, Thaurix couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. The human warship had shown no signs of fear, no hesitation. Every move they made seemed calculated and precise. He had faced countless enemies before, but none had made him question his own abilities like the humans had. Suddenly, a new signal flashed on the main screen. A small, unassuming ship had appeared from the side of the human warship, moving swiftly toward the Vexari fleet. It was nothing like the massive battle cruiser they had been facing. This ship was smaller, sleeker, and far more agile. "Commander, we're detecting a new ship," an officer called out. It's moving toward us with incredible speed." Thaurix's eyes widened in alarm. He had never seen a ship move so fast. The human warship had already proven its strength, but this new vessel was even more unpredictable. The Vexari fleet was still in the process of retreating, and now they had to deal with this new threat. "Divert all power to the shields," Thaurix ordered, his voice sharp. "Prepare for a possible attack." The small human ship closed in quickly, darting through space with the grace of a predator hunting its prey. It was fast, too fast, and its movements were erratic, making it nearly impossible for the Vexari to track. Then, without warning, the human ship fired. A single concentrated beam of energy shot out, striking one of the Vexari vessels with such force that it shook the entire fleet. The ship's shields flickered and failed, and the vessel exploded in a flash of light. The bridge of the Vexari flagship fell silent. The destruction had been swift and brutal. The humans had just shown them a new kind of weapon, a weapon they hadn't even known to fear. Thaurix's mind raced. The humans weren't just fighters. They were adaptable. They had resources and tactics the Vexari had never imagined. And now, with this new ship, it seemed like they had just scratched the surface of the human war machine. He clenched his claws tighter. "Prepare to re-engage," he ordered. "This fight isn't over. We need to learn everything we can from this encounter. And this time, we'll be ready for whatever they throw at us." The Vexari fleet moved back into position, the uncertainty of the situation weighing heavily on every officer. They were far from defeated, but the humans had just shown them something terrifying. They were far more capable than the Vexari had ever believed, and the battle for survival had only just begun. The battle was far from over. Thaurix stood on the bridge of the Vexari flagship, his gaze fixed on the human warship ahead. The destruction of one of their ships by the small, swift vessel had rattled him more than he cared to admit. The humans were proving to be more than just a challenge. They were a force to be reckoned with. The Vexari fleet had regrouped, but the fear in the air was palpable. Their previous attempts to break through the human ship's defenses had failed, and now this new threat, a smaller, more agile ship, had left them reeling. Thaurix knew the Vexari were not used to losing, and this fight had shaken their confidence. "Commander," Vorn said, his voice urgent. "The human ship is moving again. It's—" He paused as he studied the readouts. "It's coming closer. And it's accelerating." Thaurix's many eyes narrowed. This was exactly what he feared. The human warship had already displayed its strength, but now it seemed like the humans were playing a game of cat and mouse, pulling the Vexari into a position where they had the advantage. Every move the humans made was calculated. Every attack, every shift in position, felt like they were testing the Vexari's limits. "They're not afraid," Thaurix muttered under his breath. The human warship moved steadily closer, its dark form growing larger on the holographic display. It was impossible to predict what the humans would do next. They had a new ship, a new weapon, and yet they seemed unhurried, as if they knew they had all the time in the world. Suddenly, another officer called out, "Commander, the small ship, it's accelerating even faster. It's heading straight for our flagship." Thaurix's heart skipped a beat. He had seen the speed at which this new human ship moved, and now it was headed directly toward them. Without hesitation, he barked orders. "Divert all power to shields. Prepare for evasive maneuvers." The crew scrambled, but it was clear the situation was rapidly spiraling out of control. The Vexari flagship was massive, slow compared to the agile human vessel, and the gap between them was closing fast. Thaurix's claws tightened on the control panel. The small ship was closing in, and the Vexari had no way of outrunning it. "Now," Thaurix commanded, as he felt the pressure building. The crew did their best to maneuver the flagship, but the human ship was faster, more unpredictable. It darted and weaved through the space between them like a predator closing in on its prey. Then, without warning, the human ship fired. The beam that shot out from the human vessel was unlike anything the Vexari had ever seen. It wasn't just powerful, it was precise, hitting the Vexari flagship's shield with pinpoint accuracy. The shields flickered, their energy already stretched thin from previous battles, and for a moment, Thaurix thought they might fail entirely. But they held. Barely. "Shields at 30%. A frantic officer shouted. Thaurix knew they couldn't keep this up for long. The human ship was too fast, too efficient. The Vexari fleet's strength was in its numbers. But it was clear now that they were being outmatched by the human speed and cunning. "What is their goal?" Thaurix muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The humans had no intention of simply defeating them. They were playing a different game, one the Vexari hadn't even thought of. The Vexari might be the dominant species in the galaxy, but right now, the humans were turning the tables. He took a deep breath. "Fall back," Thaurix ordered, his voice steady despite the fear bubbling beneath the surface. "We need to regroup. We're not going to win this if we stay like sitting targets." The Vexari fleet reluctantly began to withdraw, but Thaurix couldn't shake the feeling that this battle was far from over. The humans had proven themselves unpredictable and deadly. And now, the Vexari were left with more questions than answers. The human warship remained in their sights, a dark shadow in the distance. They hadn't been defeated. Not yet. But one thing was clear. This encounter was far from the end. It was only the beginning. The Vexari fleet had retreated, but the human warship remained, its dark form looming in the distance. Thaurix stood at the helm of the flagship, his many eyes scanning the stars. But his thoughts were not on the stars. They were on the humans, their tactics, their technology, and the strange, unshakable confidence they displayed in the face of overwhelming force. The battle had taken a toll on the Vexari. Their shields were damaged, their ships weakened. They had underestimated the humans, and now it felt like the entire fleet was on the brink of collapse. Every officer on the bridge was on edge, the silence between them speaking volumes. The humans had proven they could fight and survive. They could no longer be seen as a weak species. "Commander," Vorn spoke, breaking the silence. "We've retreated far enough. The human warship hasn't moved. It's waiting." Thalrix didn't need to be told that. The human warship, despite their defeat, had remained exactly where it was, silent, motionless, but still there. They hadn't pursued, and they hadn't attacked. It was like the humans had no need to prove anything more. They had already made their point. Thalrix's thoughts were interrupted by another officer, her voice tense. "Sir, we've been trying to analyze the data from the battle. The human warship is still sending out those strange pulses. We've tried everything, but we can't make sense of it." The pulses the human ship emitted were unlike anything the Vexari had ever encountered. They weren't weapons. They weren't signals. They were just there, an almost rhythmic energy, like the heartbeat of the warship itself. It was unsettling, like the ship was alive. "What do they want from us?" Thalrix whispered more to himself than to anyone else. They had come seeking a victory, but the humans had made it clear that the Vexari were nothing but ants to them. They could destroy them whenever they wished. The thought gnawed at him, filling him with unease. Vorn glanced at the commander. "Perhaps they're waiting for us to make the next move. They know we're not done yet. They know we can't just leave." Thalrix nodded slowly. "They are patient. We are not. But we need to learn more. We need to understand what they really want." For the first time in a long while, Thalrix felt doubt creeping into his mind. The Vexari had always been the hunters. They had always been in control. But now it felt like the humans were the ones with the upper hand. They weren't fighting to win. They were waiting for the Vexari to make a mistake, and they had already made the first. "Send a message to the human warship," Thalrix ordered, his voice firm. "We'll offer a ceasefire. No more fighting. Let's see if they are willing to negotiate." The officer at the communications station nodded and quickly sent the message. The seconds stretched into minutes, but there was no response. Just as Thalrix was about to order the message to be repeated, the screen flickered to life. The human warship responded. "We have nothing to negotiate." The message was simple, cold, direct. The words sent a chill down Thalrix's spine. The humans had no intention of negotiating. They were not interested in diplomacy. They were interested in one thing: survival. The Vexari commander stood still for a long moment, contemplating. The message was clear. The humans had no fear. They didn't need the Vexari to bend to their will. They were already in control. Thalrix finally turned to his officers, his voice filled with resolve. "Prepare the fleet. We will not be cowed by these humans. We'll return when we're ready. But we won't forget this." The Vexari fleet drifted slowly, cautiously, away from the human warship. They had come seeking victory, but instead they had been forced to face a humbling reality. The humans were not what they had expected, and the battle was far from over. But for the first time, Thalrix understood something important. The war was not just about strength. It was about knowing when to fight and when to wait. And the humans, they were masters at waiting. The Vexari fleet had retreated far enough into deep space to regain some semblance of control, but the human warship never left their sight. Even from this distance, Thalrix could see the dark silhouette of the ship, motionless and imposing against the backdrop of distant stars. The humans weren't following them, but their presence lingered like a shadow that would not disappear. The Vexari commander stood on the bridge, his many eyes fixed on the view screen, deep in thought. The battle had been a failure. They had underestimated the humans, and now they were left wondering what the next step should be. The damage to their fleet was not insignificant, And while they had not been completely destroyed, their pride had taken a blow. "Commander," Vorn said, breaking the silence, "we've gathered all the data we can from the previous engagement. The human warship is powerful beyond anything we've encountered. But there's something we still don't understand. Those strange energy pulses. We can't get a clear read on them." Falrix nodded. "I know. Whatever they're doing, it's more than just a weapon. It's like they're studying us, probing us for weaknesses." The words lingered in the air. The Vexari had always been the ones to study and understand other species, their minds sharp with knowledge and technology. But this time, the tables had turned. The humans were not acting like the other species they had conquered before. There was no desperation in their actions. They were calm, methodical, and patient. They had something the Vexari had never seen: control. "We need to know more about them," Falrix continued, his voice heavy with thought. "We can't continue on this path without understanding their true capabilities." The officer at the communications station, a young Vexari named Yara, looked up from her screen. "Sir, there's a new signal coming from the human ship. It's different from before." Falrix straightened, his attention sharpening. "Different how?" Yara hesitated for a moment before responding. "It's like a call. Not a transmission, but a message sent directly into space. It's very faint, but we're picking up traces of it. It's not something we've ever seen before." Falrix's curiosity piqued. A call. What did the humans want now? "Track it," he ordered. "Let's see where it leads." The crew worked quickly, analyzing the signal. It was strange and fragmented, but as they followed it, something became clear. It was leading them toward the human warship, drawing them closer. The message wasn't just an invitation. It was a challenge. "Sir," Yara said, her voice a little shakier now, "it seems to be calling us back. It's like they want us to come closer." Falrix's mind raced. The humans weren't retreating. They weren't trying to hide or run. They wanted to face them again. And they were using this strange signal to draw the Vexari back into their reach. "They're trying to bait us," Falrix said, a grim realization settling over him. The humans weren't afraid of them. They were the ones being tested. The humans were playing a game, and the Vexari were the ones being led into it. "We can't ignore it," Vorn said, his voice quiet but firm. "If we back down again, we risk losing everything. The humans will see it as weakness." Falrix clenched his claws. He had never been one to back down. The Vexari were proud, powerful, and dominant, and now they were being forced into a corner. But the humans had the advantage. They knew it. And perhaps worst of all, the Vexari knew it too. "Prepare the fleet," Falrix finally said, his voice cold and resolved. "We're going back, but this time, we're not just attacking. We'll be ready for whatever they throw at us." The Vexari fleet, battered but not broken, began to move forward once more, drawn to the human warship like moths to a flame. The humans had already shown their strength. Now it was time for the Vexari to show theirs. As they drew closer, Falrix couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap the humans had set, knowing they would never be able to resist. But the Vexari had no choice. They had to face their fears. They had to face the humans. And this time, they would do it on their terms. The Vexari fleet had approached the human warship once more, this time with no room for hesitation. The strange signal they had picked up continued to pulse through space, drawing them closer. Falrix stood at the helm of the flagship, his claws tightly gripping the control panel. The fleet had suffered significant losses in their previous engagement, and now, every officer on the bridge knew this would be the final encounter. There would be no retreat this time. "Commander," Vorn said, his voice tense, "we're within firing range. The human ship is still silent. It's almost like they're waiting for us." Falrix nodded, his many eyes narrowing. He could feel the weight of the situation, the pressure mounting with each passing second. The human warship loomed ahead, dark and imposing. It had become clear that the humans were not afraid. They didn't fear the Vexeri fleet, and they didn't seem to fear anything at all. They were a new kind of enemy, calm, confident, and relentless. "Prepare the weapons," Thaurix ordered, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts in his mind. "We will not make the same mistake again. This time, we will strike first." The officers worked quickly, adjusting the weapon systems, while the entire fleet held its position, ready for action. The human warship remained motionless, like a giant waiting in the dark. For a moment, there was an eerie silence. Thaurix knew this was a trap, but he couldn't back down now. The humans had already shown they were willing to fight. They had challenged the Vexari, and now it was time to prove they could win. Firing sequence initiated. One of the officers called out. The countdown began. Thaurix's heart pounded in his chest as the weapons powered up. The Vexeri fleet fired. The blast of energy erupted from their ships, speeding toward the human warship. Thaurix watched with a mix of anticipation and dread. The energy beams struck the shields of the human warship, but something unexpected happened. The shields didn't just absorb the energy. They seemed to bend it. A wave of light exploded outward, and suddenly, the Vexeri fleet found themselves under attack. "What is this?" Vorn shouted, eyes wide with shock. "The humans." Before he could finish his sentence, a blast of energy slammed into the Vexari flagship. The shields flared, and the ship rocked violently. Officers scrambled at their stations, trying to keep the ship steady, but it was clear they were being overwhelmed. The human warship's shields had absorbed their attack, and now it was retaliating. Energy pulses shot out in all directions, striking the Vexeri ships with precision. Thaurix's mind raced as he watched his fleet come under fire. They were outmatched. The human technology was unlike anything they had ever faced. "Return fire," Thaurix commanded, his voice filled with urgency. "Give them everything we've got." But no matter how much they fired, the human warship remained unscathed. Every blast from the Vexeri fleet seemed to disappear into the void, absorbed by the human ship shields or redirected back at them. Then, a new message came through. It wasn't a transmission from the human warship. It was the same strange pulse, but this time, it was stronger, clearer. It was almost as if the human warship was speaking directly to them, sending a message through the very energy it emitted. "We have nothing to prove," the pulse seemed to say, a cold and confident tone emanating from the energy. "We are not your enemy, but we will not be controlled." Thaurix's mind spun. The message was clear. The humans were not afraid. They were not seeking war. They simply wanted to be left alone. The Vexeri had come here seeking power, seeking to dominate. But the humans had shown them something entirely different, a force that didn't need to conquer, a force that didn't need to fight to survive. The battle had already been decided. Thaurix turned to his officers, his voice suddenly weary. "Withdraw the fleet," he ordered. "We cannot win this fight." For the first time in his life, Thaurix felt the sting of defeat. The humans had defeated them, not with sheer power, but with their resilience, their intelligence, and their ability to survive against all odds. The Vexeri fleet began to pull back, and the human warship watched, silent, as they retreated. As the distance between the two fleets grew, Thaurix could only reflect on what had just happened. The humans had proven something that even the mightiest of the Vexari had forgotten. Sometimes, strength doesn't lie in the power to destroy. It lies in the power to endure. And the humans had shown that they would endure, no matter what.